some carvings that are about 5,500 years old. Can you see these carvings in here, these deep depressions?
Yeah.
These were made by somebody using stone tools. Can you imagine how hard that would have been? And these deep marks are known as cup marks, C-U-P, cup marks. And around, can you see there's a ring roughly carved around? Mm-hmm. It's known as a ring mark. When we put them together, we call it a cup and ring mark. It's really simple stuff here, okay? We have no imagination for naming things in Scotland. Now, somebody carved these on the stone when the stone was what I still call living rock. By that I mean it was part of a cliff face on the other side of that hill, okay? So you've got a piece of rock, part of the cliff face, I call it living rock, and somebody stood there and carved these cup and ring marks, and we have absolutely no idea why. There was no written language, there wasn't even pictograms back then. This is possibly a language, we don't know, but we can just marvel at it, really. Then around 3,200 years ago, somebody else came along, cut this out of the living rock, and they brought it here and put it upright. Now there's about a third more rock below, so you can imagine that's a fairly sizable chunk of rock to move and stand upright. Why did they do it? Well, we have a bit more of a clue here. If you look behind you, there are two stones, a bit like a goalpost, and behind me, another two stones, a bit like a goalpost. Well, this is astronomical. So the stones align during the spring and autumn equinox. So we get an alignment with the heavens on the spring and autumn equinox. Now around Scotland we have got about 40,000 sites of Neolithic and Metholithic stones. It's an awful lot. Mm-hmm. And about 30% of them have some sort of astronomical significance. So there's not a coincidence here, because a lot of them are lined up with the winter solstice, the summer solstice, the equinoxes. Some of them are lined up with phases with the moon and all sorts of things like this. In fact, the oldest calendar in the world is in a field near Aberdeen, and it's just a set of 12 stones, and it's a lunar calendar. So these guys 10,000 years ago knew exactly what they were doing. It's absolutely incredible. It really was spectacular. So that's what we're looking at here. This is an observatory. Okay. Now, what I want you to do next is go and spend a bit of time, go and look at all the stones, go and take your photographs. If anybody wants to do the Outlander photo, I'm happy to oblige, okay? Now, we will then go through the kissing gate. This is a gate. It is called a kissing gate. It is exceptionally bad luck to go through the gate without kissing over the top your significant other. Okay? If any ladies don't have a significant other, I'm willing to stand in. You know, I'll take that shot for the team. Okay? So that's called a kissing gate. When we get to the end of the little pathway there, you're going to see two cairns. One is a stone circle, a standing stone circle, but there is a cairn around that, and we ask you not to walk on the stones of the cairns, guys, because they're causing a lot of damage, a lot of wear. Okay, okay.
What's the word you're using? Cairn?
Cairn.
K-A-C-A-I-R-N.
That's like there's a city in Australia, Cairns.
Cairns, yeah.
And it's basically a pile of stones is what it means, but okay. It's a cairn. Probably started off as a temple, eventually became a burial ground. So go and spend a few minutes, spread out, get your photos, and I'm happy to do that. So, what we have here is a cairn. Now, The Ring of Stones is the oldest part of the cairn, alrighty? Now, originally, there would have been a ring of trees, okay? And that is what we call a circle. Basically, the old word for circle, okay? Now, when the trees fall down, rot, disappear, we replace them with stone, right, to mark where that circle was. And so we think that this was a meeting place. It was a temple, okay? Now, eventually, that religion died out. The Catholic Church came to Scotland in the 6th century. But that Catholic Church was a very druidic form of the Catholic Church, what we call the Culdee. And the Culdee would meet out in the open air. They didn't go into churches, we didn't have any churches. And they would meet at the stone circles, what we call a circle. And what do we call a church in Scotland nowadays?
A kirk.
A kirk. So a kirk comes from the stone circles circle. Okay? Like Captain Kirk, alrighty? It basically is a circle. And that is what we call a church today. Now eventually we stopped using those places as a place of worship, but they were still powerful, and powerful people wanted to be associated with them, and they wanted to be buried in the circle. So if you look in the center of the circle, you can see a stone coffin. That is what we call a cist. C-I-S-T, cist. Comes from a Germanic word, kista, meaning coffin. Now, 13,000 years ago, if you had come to Scotland, well, there was no Scotland. We were buried under 2 kilometers of ice. It's called the Wisconsin Ice Sheet. Traveled right across the United States, right across the Atlantic Ocean, and it covered Scotland and most of England down to just north of London, okay? Covered in 2 kilometers of ice. That ice retreated about 12,000 years ago, and Scotland was left bare rock. There was nothing here. Now, luckily for us, there is a warm wind that comes from the Sahara called the Sirocco, and it brings with it a lot of dust, dirt, sand, seeds. And that is where we get our very thin layer of soil. If you were to dig down, you're only going to go down a couple of inches before you hit rock. Okay? So you can't dig down to bury. It's just not practical. So we built a stone coffin. We take all the small stones that are lying around, pile them over the top to stop the bodies being, bothered by animals. So all these little stones were once piled up into the middle of the cairn, but they've now all been sort of moved around when they were looking to find out what was inside, etc. Okay. We have 600 stone circles in Scotland. There's only about 100 in Ireland, 100 in Wales, and 100 in England. There's over 600 of them in Scotland. So we believe that this kind of idea originated in Scotland and actually spread out into other parts of the UK and into other parts of Europe. Now the smaller cairn is actually the older one, much older, so much so that there are no standing stones there anymore. But guys, spread out, take your pictures. The bluebells look lovely. We're heading to the burial chamber up there in your own time, okie dokie, but spread out, take your pictures. We're in no rush whatsoever.